and welcome to tonight's session, the first for 2016. We are all majorly giddy here tonight at the Foundry HQ. We are joined on the sofas tonight by Commander Chris Hadfield, Dan Turner, director and animator, Tracy King, co-director and producer, and our very own Dan Ring, lead research engineer. So we're all here tonight to talk about Chris's latest project, It's Not Rocket Science, which is a comedy animation piece for children and adults alike that was written and produced by Evan Hadfield, narrated by Chris, and brought to life by the lovely Tracy and Dan. We will be taking questions tonight on the usual hashtag TF Sessions. So if you have any questions for Dan, Chris, or Tracy, I will be back up again at the end to field those questions to the guys and get some answers, and we will try and get through as many as we possibly can because I'm sure it's going to go crazy. So I'm going to hand it over to these lovelies on the sofas to talk through the project.
Hello.
So over to you guys.
So firstly, welcome Tracy, Chris and Dan.
Hello.
We're
Thanks, Dan.
absolutely delighted to have you on the show today. This is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. So, It's Not Rocket Science. Tell us all about it. What is the show?
If you have had the experience of flying in space, I've flown 3 times, a couple different space stations, and lived off the Earth for half a year. What do you do with that experience? I mean, how do you explain it to yourself, but also how do you explain it to everybody else in a way that means something, and how do you give back on the incredible privilege that you've had? And while I was in space during my 3rd flight, I was discussing with Evan Hadfield, who's the absent member of this team, how can we help people understand science, help people understand the world, help people understand the perspectives of how all these things work together, and maybe use some of the privilege that comes along with being an astronaut to then create something that will help explain it all. And we thought, let's put together a series on some of the basic scientific questions and themes, make it animated, take the power of YouTube and the internet with the ubiquity of that and the diverse accessibility of it, and write some scripts that will help people understand those theories better. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, we need to then write a good script, have a good narration, but also, most importantly, have a really talented artistic team to be able to make it visual. And so we cast a net out using Twitter and the internet all around the world saying, hey, who would like to work on this project with us?
Fantastic. So before we go any further, we actually have a teaser trailer here that we can show. So this will help you guys at home see exactly what the guys have been working on.
9, 7, 5,
It's not rocket science.
Excellent. That looks absolutely fantastic. It's like the art style in that is unreal. Like absolutely, it really looks very nice. So how did this whole project come about then?
So Evan Hadfield, my son, put a request out through Twitter using all of the folks that follow through that side of social media, saying this is what we're looking for, and we had a lot of people respond from all around the world. But fortunately, Tracy and Dan responded almost instantly.
Yeah, and I saw the tweet pretty much, I mean, it was about, 7 p.m. and we have a tiny little 2-person studio and we work, late into the night quite often. And I saw the tweet and it said we're making an animated science series. and I looked at Dan and I said, well, that's us. We are going to win this job. Which, I mean, YouTube retweeted that tweet, so that, everybody saw it. So I think we had long odds, but we're nothing if not determined. So I spent a couple of hours putting together a really lengthy pitch document for Evan, just to say this is who we are. We made Tim Minchin's Storm, which is a very big animation, and we've also done a lot of science communication, straight science communication in animation. So I said, this is all the stuff we've done, and also, we're really cool, please give us this job. And a couple of weeks later, he came back and said, right, here's a brief. I've put it out to a couple of animators, do some character designs and a bit of test footage, see what you come back with. So then Dan spent a week researching,
also known as stalking, Chris. I'd probably show up on some lists now.
I mean, just hundreds of videos. YouTube
just
videos.
everything from when you were on board the ISS, the audiobook on loop. So I now have your voice just constantly in my head, which is nice. And just trying to research and to get as excited as possible about all of the things that we could put into this show. So I mean, we'll go over some of the other stuff later on, but we were just determined to get the pitch as right as possible.
This is the stuff we're into. I mean, this is our dream project, and so this is not a job for us. This is, this is our life. And so we sent off the character designs and some concepts that we'll have a look at in a bit that Dan had done of the sort of space pod and some of the technical stuff he put in there. And we kind of went, right, it'll be a couple of weeks before we hear back from Evan, and we're just going to have to bite our fingernails till then. And about 4 minutes later, I got an email back from Evan, and it just said, "Oh my God." I think we did well.
Did this have anything possibly to do with the co-star of the show? So
this was the research paid
Albert
off here, I think.
Albert the space pug that you can see here in
we had the bright idea.
He's bottom right, not
we were
not bottom left.
We were developing Chris the character, and I said we need light relief. We need a comedy sidekick here. Do you think Chris has any pets? So we Googled, Chris Hadfield pets, and he's got a pug. And of course, there's no funnier animal than a pug, and it was so perfect. So Dan designed this pug space suit, and the Canada patch on the pug's suit, instead of being a maple leaf, it's a paw print. So there's little details like that, and I think it was the pug what won it. Would you say?
Well,
would you say that was right?
Well, we looked at it all, but just the amount of work that you'd put in, but also the track record that you had from doing Storm, which was so creative and so original, but also such a strong voice. It all convinced us on our end that these are the people we want to work with, and the speed with which you've done it, and the depth of professionalism you'd put it into already, it convinced us. So now it's a matter of, okay, great, now we're away to the races. How are we gonna make this happen?
Excellent. And then so going from sort of the idea then to bringing the characters to life. So say like Albert here, or even Chris yourself here. How do you what's your process then for
this was a nightmare. Because it's the most important thing in the show. If it's Chris Hadfield's animated show and it doesn't look like Chris Hadfield, that's going to be confusing. One of the strange things, I mean, it really is just a question of going into a creepy level of detail at looking at the phrenology of Chris's head, and finding out what the shapes are underneath. How does his skull differ to normal people? And strange things like, because we knew that the show takes place in space, and most of the videos of you, the most prominent stuff is when you're on board the ISS. Obviously, your face is in zero gravity, and as you said, when you land, one of the first things you realized is that your lips have weight. It takes, you have to fight against gravity to talk. So your face looks different in zero gravity. So in our version, you have sort of an upturned bean of a nose, and you've got a red face and sort of rosy cheeks, because the blood's not being pulled into your feet.
Right.
It's all just in your face.
And all of these development sketches, what medium did you use in order to create them all?
So this is Mischief, which is Foundry.
Well, these are all done on Mischief?
Yeah. I find
some of them look just like a charcoal sketch.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about it. What drew me to it was it's the fastest pen interaction that I've had in anything, which is why I got in touch with the guys at the Foundry anyway. I was determined that more people would use it and that I would get more features. So yeah, whenever I have to chuck down a load of ideas really quickly and just iterate and not worry about where I am on the page, I use Mischief because there is no page. You're just drawing in the ether. If you need more space over here, if you need to go in closer, knock yourself out.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's yeah.
So it's very quick to sort of like create these sketches and then iterate and go on
Yeah.
towards.
Just if you had infinite paper, you didn't have to worry about spending money.
Excellent.
That's what you get.
And then taking those sketches, which are like, I mean, they're quite distinctive. I mean, they really kind of show off some like Chris's features, and they kind of get into some details. How do you develop that further into kind of the more final project or final version?
Well, one of the most important things is rigging, which we're using Toon Boom Harmony, the sort of the top tier, which gives you the nodal compositing system. So
What does rigging mean?
rigging? It's the closest I could say was if I built a puppet of your head,
Mm-hmm.
it would be the armature underneath. It would be the bones, and it would be
I
the
see.
controls that cause your jaw to move up and down.
Huh.
So we build digital versions of those, and there's a lot of sort of efficiency that goes in. You have to be careful that you don't build a model of your head that we wouldn't be able to use in a certain circumstance. If you realize that if you needed to make it look angry and that suddenly breaks where the eyebrows are and they're not occluding the eyes properly, there's a lot of sort of technical detail and clear layout that you need to sort of take note of, and just making sure that you don't get too close to it, because if anyone's ever stared at a word for too long and it becomes meaningless, that's what Chris's face is ended looking like. So it's plenty of times I've finished drawings of Chris and then I just realised, oh right, Chris has ears, I'll put it
Yeah.
yeah, it's very easy.
It certainly does, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of his unique features here.
Two of them,
You
actually.
too? Yeah.
Two? Oh, okay.
Well, and the moustache is a unique feature.
Oh,
And
that's
in
true.
in
Yeah.
the rig, the
Yeah.
moustache has as many nodal points as the eyes. I mean, it's a
It's
very
true.
expressive part
Yeah,
of the
it was a
animation.
very strange career moment. Was laying out the sort of curves that would control Chris's moustache. Very strange.
The moustache is in your hands.
Yeah.
So you're saying that your mustache can convey as much emotion as your eyes then?
That's what it sounds like.
the trick.
Yeah,
Pretty
In
good
impressive.
to
cartoon
know.
form, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And they like having a look now at some of the so you've kindly shared with us a speed drawing that you've done of drawing Albert the space pug. And so would you mind taking us through like what's actually going on here?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that I sort of. It's kind of overkill for the sake of demonstration that I've based it off of a circle, and then I've sort of subdivided the grid. And the trick here is is essentially to give yourself a recipe so that you can draw the same character over and over. I'm being a little too precise here because I'm not as much of a draftsman as the old sort of Bugs Bunny era animators that could do this in their head. But essentially, looking at the character that you've drawn and then finding out what the underlying geometry is, what's a sphere, what are the ratios, what lines up with what. So you can see like the tops of the eyes line up together, and the bottom of the eye lines up with where the peak of the lip is, and things like that. And it's really just a checklist so that I can make sure that I draw the same character. It doesn't fly off model in the next shots. Because we're rigging them, and we can move on to the next one, which is a quick doodle in Mischief of Chris's head. Because we've rigged it, we don't really need to draw the heads that often. That's one of the benefits of rigging the thing. You don't need to keep building it. But if we need to push into a different expression, if we have a special, I don't know, if something that requires Chris's face to look radically different, I don't know what that might be. But to make sure that if I come back to this 6 months later, or if we work with other animators to make sure that they're drawing the same Chris that I've been drawing.
Wow.
So it's really a consistency thing. But yeah.
When you say a speed drawing, how long is the real version of that?
Oh, that's real time.
Really? You should drink less coffee.
I think that the drawing of the head took about 12 minutes. I think.
That one that we're watching there is
Yeah.
about a 12-minute.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
And how long would the development, like to get to that point, like all of the sketches and everything, the character development, how long would that take then?
Oof, that was the longest part, I think. When you
couple
say,
of weeks. No, it wasn't even that actually, because it was a week.
well,
It was between Evan emailing the brief and us sending the characters. It was a week.
yeah,
Oh, really?
And it hasn't. I mean, we've tweaked it since then, but not enormously. I mean, the essence is, kind of. And I do think that that has essence of Chris. That is, you know, that's sort of what we sold you on. So we didn't want to change it too much from the original pitch.
And you were saying before about like how you hear Chris's voice in your head now after from listening to audiobooks on repeat. Did that help guide you, the kind of sketches and developments?
Or do you have nightmares?
He mutters your name in his sleep. It's
No,
very-
Chris, no. Weirdly, it does. Especially, I mean, listening to An Astronaut's Guide, the audiobook. It's about how to deal with, you know, responsibility, and then it's about making sure that you're minimizing the risks of killing yourself. So there's a certain tone to the book that is, there's an authority, and there's a tone of voice that is, if it made its way in anywhere, it was in the eyebrows. It was the stern eyebrows that just one might occasionally come up, that sort of thing. So that was a huge part of it. I mean, obviously the videos and the audiobook, but yeah, that's invaluable, really. You can't really caricature someone for an animated show without taking the voice into account.
Yeah, fantastic. So this has covered sort of a lot of the character development and sketching and like fleshing the thing out. But jumping back a minute, like in history, you've brought along a couple of slides from the original pitch of the show, and there's some really interesting, cool stuff here. Would you mind like explaining a bit about it and going through it?
Well, first of all, the middle in the bottom is the Canadarm, which I probably know less about than Chris. Probably.
The space station is assembled mostly through big robots that are on the outside of the ship. And there was one that was permanently mounted to the space shuttle. And when the space shuttle would come up and dock, we would use that big arm on the space shuttle to reach back and grab things and delicately pull them out of the space shuttle and hold them up like an offering. And then we installed a huge arm on the space station. Well, the first one was Canadarm, the second one was cleverly Canadarm2. And Canadarm2 would reach down to Canadarm and grab this thing and then hold it triumphantly and then trundle around the station and install it. And bit by bit, that's how we built the entire space station. And in fact, during my second space flight, we took Canadarm2 up there, and during my spacewalks, I helped unfold it and bolt it together and bring it to life and plug it in and make it part of the space station. So yeah, I spent a lot of my life involved with bringing Canadarm to the space station. So it was delightful to see it in your initial pitch and to see both the accuracy, but also the comedy of how you can take something as lifeless and boring as a long interconnected tube and somehow give it a slightly comic personality.
And I mean, this is so. Chris in the show is stranded in space in his sort of personal, his one-man spacecraft with Albert, who's sneaked on board. And Albert, I should say, is so stupid that the laws of physics don't apply to him. So he will occasionally act like he's not in zero gravity. The rest of the time, he's sort of doggy paddling
Immune
around.
to the rigors of space.
Yeah, getting into stuff. And so one of the questions was, you know, what would a personal space pod look like? And so Dan designed it as it's kind of Chris's head. It's a big solar panel mustache, and then a big window. So when Chris is standing in the window, he becomes the eyeball. And then it's got two Canadarms, so it can do anything. You've got him there.
I mean, the Canadarm. Am I right in thinking that's it's not only Canada's invitation to the ISS was to build the arm that built the station, but it's also on the back of the $5 bill.
It is, yeah. It was our contribution that allows Canada to be part of it. But yeah, it's so recognizable and honored within Canada that we put it on the most common piece of money, basically the $5 bill.
Yeah, we figured we'd stick to on either side.
But then that way you can have the pod playing the guitar, or
and there's little gags there, like playing that's the Larrivee. There's even a little label. It's the Larrivee from the ISS being dropped by the pod, and it falls into orbit, and it just pulls another one out of a hatch and carries on playing. It's a real sort of Inspector Gadget thing. We've got it's based on there's the cupola and Tranquility, which is, I'm assuming that's where you took your photos from.
Yep.
The cupola.
Exactly.
And actually a little bit of SpaceX, the Dragon pods. Really, it's quite strange to go through the mill with designs and then end up with a cylinder, but that's how they build them.
I'm sure that's what happens in the CSA as well. Like,
so.
Turns out cylinders are just, engineering-wise are pretty sound.
And then top right was an idea that actually bottom right really is an idea for how we could use multiple sets. The idea is that because it's zero gravity, the sets exist on a kind of a Rolodex, and there's a trapdoor in the middle of the floor. So Chris stays suspended in space, and then the Rolodex spins and brings a new room to Chris. And he's, he was on the flight deck in his Captain Kirk chair, and now he's suddenly in the classroom or he's in the laboratory. So it's a nice sort of, I like playing with things that are pseudo possible. We show how
pseudo.
And this is also something that's kind of nice that you can only get away with in animation, right? Where
yeah.
So like this, it's another slide from your pitch as well. So this is set in China, is it?
Yeah, so the first episode is about vaccines told through the history of smallpox, and there's an early part of the smallpox story which is about a hermit in China who sort of discovered that if you shove a kind of disgusting pustule of smallpox scab onto somebody else, that sort of creates an immunity. So we and that was in Evan's sort of brief. So Dan worked up some China sort of, I guess, concept art there, and went as far as researching the genuine geography of that area, which, I mean, it seems like overkill, but I think those sort of things really do inform the art.
So I mean, going through Google Images and looking for Kaifeng City, and this top right, I think it's the Qingming scroll, which is this, I guess it's like a Chinese version of the Bayeux Tapestry. It's gigantic, and there are a few little sections where you can see marketplaces and the sort of armaments on the edge of the city, and that's what made it into the bottom left.
And the ancient Mandarin in the little flags is all correct. It's all
it says
we sweat the small stuff.
Warning.
We learned that.
We evaluated you on your ancient Mandarin.
But you never know.
You never know. I mean, that little sign in the corner in correct text, or at least Google Translate says, that says warning smallpox. So
So this level of detail, this was all just for the pitch. I mean, that's quite intricate.
Yes,
So
but we love this. I mean, this is, this we do this stuff anyway. So we'll sit and discuss a history of smallpox just for fun in the evening.
yeah.
So to get, it's a privilege to get to draw this kind of thing. And
but it brought some stuff home to us, which was number one, the level of excitement that they had, obviously. Two, the willingness to step up to the work.
Yeah.
But then three, the flexibility and speed with which it could be turned into a visual product was kind of staggering. And to see all that put together was really easy for us to decide who we wanted to work with.
Fantastic. And I mean, going back to kind of the idea of picking smallpox as your first episode, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you decide what you're gonna show on your show? Like what science topics are you going to cover?
Well, we sat down with Evan and brainstormed what are some of the current scientific topics that have a public debate. Which ones are, and don't, most people already have an opinion, or at least they have a feeling for what they believe.
Yeah.
But belief is the easy part. The actual rational part of it, building the unmistakable basis upon which some of the beliefs should be based. That's the part we wanted to fill in.
Right.
How do you best give people, in an easily absorbable but also easily memorable manner, the fundament that then allow them maybe to draw a conclusion for themselves, not based on belief, but based on a new sequence of ideas, which are irrefutable, and so address some of the common issues. And there's a current debate about vaccination, and so there's some tremendous, very clear historical vaccination stories that are sort of self-evident, and so we began there. And then there are other topics that we're looking at that we can choose that are in a similar vein.
Excellent. And I mean, it seems like on YouTube especially that there are a lot of science shows that use animation to kind of convey their message, convey their story, but your show is different, isn't it? In the way it tells that story.
We want it to be sort of a mirror of the public talks that I give, in that I want to inspire people to have a sense of wonder. I want them to be absorbed in what's actually happening, and therefore maybe opening their thoughts to an idea that may not have been open otherwise, and then to not even recognize while it's going on that perhaps this is this is a new fundament of information on which maybe I'll start thinking in the future when this issue comes up. But then hopefully to come away after either a talk or after having been through It's Not Rocket Science, next time the issue comes up publicly or it comes up in somebody's life, some of the ideas that we tried to clearly project here, some of the facts and background on it, will just be part of the base with which people then evaluate further information. That's kind of the flow. Not you need to believe this, not these are the statistics, but instead this is the bedrock of fact, and build your own conclusions based on that. Because if people use actual factual basis, of course, to then come to their own conclusions, then it is a much more strong conviction that results.
Right. Yeah, and that sounds great. I mean, it sounds a lot more like it's a discussion show more than a kind of explaining this is what it is show.
That's hopefully the idea, and not just a discussion show, but a discussion where the viewer is involved in it, mentally integrated into the discussion, if at all possible. And it's what I try and do when I'm having a live show with people, and was very much the genesis behind using YouTube and the animation to discuss these ideas.
Because I mean, you're very active on social media, I suppose. So I mean, I suppose you do get that engagement that you can.
And if you watch the whole history of how we've been communicating on social media, it's exactly the same. The underpinnings of ideas. Hey, this is a fact. This is a new thing. This is a really interesting discovery. Look at how, when birds fly in a V, why do they choose, and what is the frequency with which one bird flaps its wings, and then the next bird flaps its wings, and then the next bird, and then say, it's interesting to look at, but here's the actual science behind it. And someone went through and modeled it and did the computational fluid dynamics and everything. And then the next time you look up and watch some geese go over, you see it differently. Because of one little article maybe that I referred you to, hopefully. And that subtle change of perception of the world based on fact is what I think is one of the most powerful possibilities for social media, including YouTube.
I think there's a huge challenge as well in making truth the more entertaining answer, because those kind of examples of actually understanding V formation in geese, those are pretty tricky to come by. You have to apply a fair amount of sort of artistic and poetic thinking to make the actual factual reality more entertaining than it's magic.
That's why animation's so perfect, because everybody understands cartoons. We all grow up with them, and hopefully everybody likes cartoons. And so I think you immediately sort of trust. I'm not saying you're lulled into a full sense of security, but you kind of go, oh, good, I'm on familiar ground here. This is warm and welcoming and colourful and hopefully funny. And so that puts you into a frame of mind where I think you might be very receptive. And of course that's true for the minute you put Chris on screen, people go, okay, he's a trusted voice.
Well, I think he's not only a trusted voice, he's also there's a pre-existing relationship with art. You were making music from space. That is not necessarily sugarcoating. That's the wrong way to put it. But that's making reality and making scientific boundaries more accessible by framing them poetically and seeing that we live in space now and we can make art in space. And this is really an extension of that. I mean, people know Chris as someone who isn't just speaking facts without any kind of flourish or sort of existentialism. This is a little more. There's a little more allure to it than that. So
we had a science competition across Canada, and students in high schools right across Canada were challenged to come up with a science experiment that I could demonstrate on the space station. And two young ladies came up with one very simple, which was just to wring out a wet cloth and see what would happen without gravity. Because on Earth, everybody knows what happens when you wring a cloth. Everyone's done it. It's simple. It's predictable. There's no magic to it at all. But I recognized that I would be demonstrating a whole understanding of fluid physics and of surface viscosity that most people just never think of. They never see. They never get direct evidence of it. And taking this beautiful, simple little idea, one quick demonstration in a new environment, and I think that video has been viewed 10 or 12 million times because it is it is almost artistically surprising. It's visually different than everything you've been led to believe, and therefore it stimulates you to think about what water is and how it behaves differently. And to be able to do that through cartoon, to be able to do it through music, to be able to express an idea that you thought you understood, but find a way to let people see it more clearly as the result of changing a variable, whether the variable is gravity or whether the variable is animation, that's really effective.
Yeah.
And,
You're
and you can have a
talking-
good positive result as well.
You're talking about sort of every artistic movement ever as well, taking reality and looking at it through a different lens and seeing what crops up. you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
I suppose to get to that stage, you probably have to do sort of the inverse. And going back to this for a minute, if we go into the next slide here, this is a storyboard that you guys have shared, and I suppose it's kind of doing the reverse, that it's actually taking something that's, creative and then going technical with it. Like you have to frame your story. So how would you go about, what is your storyboarding process to do this reverse creative direction?
We start with the script, which Evan's a really talented writer, so half the job is done there. In that his script is firstly very visual and secondly very funny, and he explains scientific concepts really simply and wonderfully. So our responsibility then is to make sure that this is for the teaser trailer, which is slightly different. It's not set on the space pod. This is kind of the bridge between Chris's videos and then what's going to happen next. So it's slightly different for this, but our process generally is we take the script and then Dan and I sit down together and we go, right, what visually can we add to this that's funny or interesting, but also what don't we want to distract people with, because if the voiceover is explaining something that might be a bit more complex, you don't want a big song and dance on the screen because people won't pay attention. So there's a real sort of difficult balance between what is visually interesting and what can distract from the script, and we just sit with pen and paper or sometimes around the Cintiq and just hash it out and argue about what is funny.
I was wondering when you were going to get round to the word argue. That's what this is. It's a giant argument, and then some pictures come out at the end, and it's the best way of doing it because there's no better sort of creative discussion when you can just say that's a terrible idea.
Well, and also, we don't have. There's no embarrassment between us if one of us comes up with a terrible idea. Nobody's afraid to say that in the room because it's just us two. So we just move on, and I think out of that process, we do manage to get something quite right. Sometimes between finishing the storyboard and doing an animatic, Dan will change things, and I'll go, "That's not what we agreed." But it's funnier or better. But that's fine. And then equally, he might do that, and I'll come in and go.
So, well, I'm making the animatics. That's just how it happens. Yeah. Well, quite often, because we're using Flix, which is another Foundry thing, which is amazing to be using it for a small team because it's designed to be used with gigantic studios where there are many different departments and people have to keep track of communications. But what's quite nice is to have all of the images in one place, to be able to fire them off into JPEGs, PNGs, and then to very quickly sort of set them on a timeline in Nuke or After Effects or something like that, and then to actually use that. This takes like 15 minutes to create an animation or an animatic to sell to Tracy, even if she doesn't quite get what I've drawn. This top row, for example, those are all supposed to be one drawing. And she didn't. She was like, "Well, it's just a picture of a line." So I took them into After Effects, and I very quickly just made a transition to show.
Normally make an animatic, we had to turn the teaser trailer around really quickly. So we just went straight from storyboard to animating. And Dan did have to sell me on, I want a big, long, lingering shot of a rocket. And well, when does that get funny? But it does.
And is this at the storyboard stage that you'd be hashing things out,
Right
iterating?
through to the end. We change things because we're a small studio and we don't have a whole load of bureaucracy and red tape to go through. As long as we know it's in the spirit of the thing, i.e. that Evan won't hate it, we can change things right up to the last minute, and often do. And that's the nice thing actually about having rigged characters, is that you can, within the teaser trailer, there's a sort of a double take that you do with the dog at the end, and it was a single, it was just kind of just looking down at the dog. And I was
Are these the storyboard here?
Yeah.
Are these the last 5 frames?
Yeah, the last sort of 5 frames, the punchline. And I just felt like it could be funnier. We need to sort of make more of the relationship. So Dan just rejigged the eyes, but because it's puppeteered, that's actually, he doesn't have to redraw tons of frames.
It's interesting to see those last 5 frames. They are single beat transitions. They snap together, and even with something, it's it's quite a small gesture that's being conveyed over 5 drawings. It's a double take and then disapproving, but there's a hell of a lot of interpretation that goes from taking that up to full polish, how it plays out, the blinks, the micro gestures, the movement of the character. There's a hell of a lot of interpretation that goes in there. So even with a team of 2, there's a lot of surprises that crop up, and there's a lot of well, that's not how we agreed. He's supposed to double take and then look disappeared. Yeah, so it's interesting, but it's definitely a benefit to be able to instantly know that that's not quite right, and then we
And am I right in thinking that the real Albert likes popcorn?
The real Albert likes popcorn.
Because that was a coincidence. We just kind of, Chris is sitting around watching TV.
I'm pretty. Is it just food in general?
He's an omnivore.
It's not really that much of a coincidence. Popcorn is food.
And then, Chris, would you be when you're doing the voiceovers? Then would you be at what stage would you come into this then?
It's the beauty of being connected all around the world, of course, is we can be iterative, and they could send this storyboard over, and we could look at it individually and have a quick look through, and then I would flick through the images really quickly, so they start to almost animate themselves, and you get a little feel of how it's going to flow, and then that personification naturally helps out when you think of the imagery and what Albert's doing and how we're going to tell the basic story. That really helps with the narration and sitting down and doing the narration clean to keep a certain image in your mind. So it's they feed off each other. I think just as my narrating voice was helping Dan figure out how to draw the initial images, the images of course do the reverse.
And it's nice as well once we're reaching sort of the end stages of episode 1. What we've got is a sort of a blind reading from you at the moment. But once we get onto the next iteration, then we can have Chris reading and looking at the animation as it plays in animatic form. So one hand washes the other, if you know what I mean.
There are a couple parallels to that. When I recorded An Astronaut's Guide, I started at chapter 1 and I did the whole chapter 1 and chapter 2. And by the time I got 3/4 of the way through the book, I went, well, I have to go back and redo chapter 1, because now I get a feel for what is the right way to read this book so that it is useful for the listener, right? And when I did Space Oddity on Orbit, it was the same thing. I did an audio track just with Bowie in one ear, and I just sang Oddity, and I really loved how the vocals came out. But when I put the guitar in, and then M. Greiner and Joe Corcoran put the instrumentals on Earth, and they sent me the instrumental track back up, well then I needed to redo the vocal track just to make it more integrated with the actual feel and the sound of the final music. And this is the same thing.
Excellent. So the next slide is a still from one of the shots from the teaser trailer. So this is the opening shot, I think, isn't it?
Just look how cool that is. Look at all it's technically interesting, but it's also artistically fun, and somehow the style of this drawing is the same style that is in the cartoon of my face, and that's in Albert. It all, I don't know how you even define that, but there's a certain feel to it that carries right across everything, and I think it really just speaks to the skill of these two folks that they can do that when it's probably not something that's truly quantifiable.
We call that Dan.
As a name.
A massive part of it is being interested in the subject. You find if you're animating or even just drawing someone's face, you tend to take on the emotion that you're drawing, and it's impossible to draw something that looks lively and that looks fun and engaged if you're drawing something that you just can't stand the sight of. But this is why we started working in animations. Why we made a studio was to work with this kind of material. So, and the other cool thing is that as you'll see in the next slide, if we want to pop on.
Do you want to explain what we're looking at? This is a real.
So this is you can see it playing on the monitor over there. This is to get the opening of the trailer right, and I sort of I had a hard time convincing Tracy that it was worthwhile to for me to build the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
In 3D.
Yeah, I must do this before I can make the shot.
I was like, you not just draw it, Dan.
But what I really wanted was to make sure that the grandeur and the scale and the sort of solidity, the weight of the thing was sufficient so that the opening of the trailer would work. It would be a grand scale thing, and I wanted to get correct perspective looking down the rocket, and to not be scuppered by technical drawing ability. I wanted to get the platforms that access the rocket right, and it just made sense to pop into Modo, and I went and grabbed some sort of public domain images of what the Soyuz rocket looks like, which hopefully it looks like that, and built it in very basic geometry. You know, you can see there, it's very, very sort of low poly, and then just built the rest of the Cosmodrome up, but really just the iconic part, the landing pad that comes out over the sort of
Launch pad.
Yeah, there you go. That's the word. Technical term. Yeah.
So this.
So yeah, that's what you sort of get at the end of it. You get sort of.
But that was where the magic happened, where you took some sort of public domain, accurate or picture representations of something, and you turned it into something personal and that has a distinctive artistic feel to it.
But you sat in that for real, and they shot you into space. So
That's the weird thing. Yeah.
The personal side, it's a really odd thing to go because, and actually, I think that's why Dan was so keen to build a 3D model. As much as that ate away sort of 3 days of our timescale, the respect that you need to have for.
It's probably 4.
We'll argue about it again. The respect that you have to have for something that's real. You know, the pod we've invented, that's all fine, but this is a real thing, and you know, a huge number of people work very hard to make this safe and and work. And so, you know, if we're going to caricature it, we need to be respectful. So I think you won that one in the end.
Didn't want to wing it.
Yeah.
And also there's the very conscious decision with the background objects. They're not actually part of the 3D. I didn't build any of that. I think the most that I built is maybe the block that's to the right of the rocket. But what I was able to do is take a screen capture from Modo, bring it over, and put it on a multiple layer, so I could draw over or under it. And it has all the lines necessary so I can get my vanishing points and I can draw in perspective. And I wanted to make sure that the background wasn't too precise. So those are all fake buildings, as in, obviously it's fake. But the shadows, those are all just they're done by eye. They're not supposed to be perfect. They are sort of evocations. So I wanted to make sure that the focus was here on the tip of the rocket, and then everything else goes a little more abstract as it spreads out. That's there was having the 3D as a reference to sort of paint over the top of it let me get a little bit closer to the theory that you have the saturation and the contrast and clarity, they all recede away from the object that you want to draw people's attention to. So,
and this also helps bring back Chris's point, actually, how you managed to inject your distinctive style into what was essentially created in a 3D package as opposed to a sketching package.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's. I just have nightmares of getting this right, because this was the first polished footage that we needed to make of the project, and it was the moment when I realized that I wasn't actually dreaming. I had to make this look good, and I was actually working with Chris to do a show. So yeah, it was to be honest, there was probably an aspect of wanting the geometry there to shore me up, to say just draw on top of it, you don't need to panic.
You can always trust maths.
But one thing that drives me crazy, can we go back
Yeah, of course.
Actually go 2 if you can. Sorry, I'm just I need to check. These red and white things to the left and right of the rocket, I thought that they were radio towers when I was drawing it. And I was listening to something recently about rockets and so on that said that those are actually lightning conductors to make sure the rocket doesn't get struck.
Yeah.
Did I draw them too short? Because at the moment they're useless.
It depends how well they conduct electricity.
Okay, all right. So they're made of
So I'm letting you off the hook.
All right, yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. But no, basically. That's a nice way of saying, no, that's wrong. Great, okay.
Yeah. Like Chris, if you looked out the Soyuz when you were in this and you saw two of these things shorter than the ground,
Oh, great.
would you be worried?
Well, they don't get a lot of lightning in Kazakhstan, so it's okay.
But why did they build them then? Is that what they told you on the launch pad? It's fine.
I was letting you off the hook again, Dan.
Okay.
So, carrying on then, this actually, like, this picture here is a pipeline of your workflow. So, like, how you manage to produce the entire show. And this, so it kind of relates back to something that Chris was saying about how, when you work, you do one stage and you go back to iterate on things. And one of the nice things about this that I think is when I was talking to you earlier about it, is that this is a quite involved pipeline. This is quite heavy, and it goes everything from like visual development to like what is it, storyboarding, animatics, animation, everything covers scoring and composing. But the important thing that I thought from this was that there's only about 4 people involved in all this. That's an incredible achievement to be able to produce a show like this, like of such a high quality, with so few people. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 factors to that. One is that the tools that are available, software has democratized animation, so you don't need hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, you can do it that way, or you can just be 2 people in a tiny studio, surrounded by cats. And then, of course, the other factor is our combined skills. Dan is not just a coder, illustrator, animator. He's also a multi-instrumentalist and composer. So we do all the sound effects and Foley ourselves. We do all the music scoring ourselves. So, and those are things normally you have to outsource. It's very unusual to find. If I could clone Dan, I would be very rich. You don't normally find 1 or 2 people who can do all of those things. And also, I mean, this is an idealised version of our workflow. A lot of these things happen simultaneously.
The real workflow is like a big cartoon fight cloud with fists coming out, and then some pictures come out at the bottom. But one thing, actually, I remember saying to you, actually, when we came over to Toronto, was what this doesn't really get across. This could be a workflow of a studio that has a background art department. It has a character design department. The fact that it's just us, and if something small changes, what we don't need to do is wear away at the relationships of the people that we're working with. If I needed someone to do sound design, or I needed someone to write the music for this, I don't like having those conversations. Well, first of all, I don't like telling people what to do if I don't know what that is, because I don't know if I'm being unreasonable. But also, I don't like wearing away at the working relationships. Just change it, just make the music 1 second longer. Well, that's really annoying, and that's not an easy thing to do. So I like that if something changes, we're able to change it in-house, and we don't wear away at goodwill. That's a nice. That's one of the biggest aspects of it, as far as I'm concerned, is that it keeps the project personal and keeps the business as far away from the creativity as possible. I don't have to say, no, I can't ask the story guy, the sound guy for something because we've already used him for 7 days and he costs this much. If it's important for the show, I'll do it. It's fine.
It's the beauty of the technological overlay on top of the fundamental human talent, right? It enables people 50 years ago would have just loved to have that amount of autonomy in the creative process, I think. And it's only enabled by the things that have been invented between then and now.
Yeah.
Speaking of technical overlays, very well segued there. So this is, I thought this is just an interesting thing to share if we're talking about Foundry stuff as well. This is a technique that I sort of came up with out of sort of fear of getting started, I guess. Like if you have a blank canvas, or if you have an empty timeline, if you're editing or if you're writing music or something like that. A big part of it for me is just getting enough in place that the thing the thing breathes on its own, that you can see, where the sections are. So what I've done is, because you can turn the background semi-transparent in Mischief, I decided to use it as a sort of a marker system. So instead of just putting a little arrow down that says, "Oh, this is where this is," by the way, on screen. That's the soundtrack to the to the teaser trailer. This is the orchestration that sort of swells up as the rocket takes off.
So these are various tracks there? Are
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
blue
The
and
bottom
bits?
green stuff is that's all the orchestra, and then the top is samples. So you can see that that top one that sort of fades in is a general sort of airport and rumbling ambience, and then a little further the rocket rumbling comes in, and then there's some birds that scatter, and you can even just draw the birds in. Why not? You can't do that when you're using markers. But also it means that I can have a gestural approach to the tone of the thing. This is where it shifts into a more of a minor key. This is where, and if you're doing visual stuff, this is where your jump cuts become more frenetic, or this is where your color grading becomes more warm and sunny versus cool. I think it sort of preserves the human touch. It reminds me of there was a video of Miyazaki going around, I think it's doing the rounds the last sort of week, where he's in his office alone, waving his hands in the air and clicking a stopwatch, and he's recording the transitions of the animation as it plays in his head.
Right.
And it's that stuff that retains the human input of the thing, I think. And I'm all about sort of minimizing the distance between the technology and what your impulses sort of tell you, getting what's in your head as quickly onto the page or into the application as possible. So I mean, we're going to play the music in a mo, but you can see there's like a swell of drums that come in at the start. There are two sections. The first section, the brass sings the main score, and then in the second section, the strings take over, and then there's a set of sort of big timpani swells as it gets even more tense.
So I'll play the music here, and you should be able to follow along at home, where the music kind of rises.
Although
and
the
goes
bouncing
along.
ball that is not there.
Yeah.
And we can't even hear it in the studio, so everyone's just going, I feel it.
You can really, see, it worked. Yeah.
Okay, so let us know when it's finished playing.
Yeah.
Good? Okay.
Yeah.
So that was one little idea, which I thought, so next time I'm doing editing or any kind of timeline-based thing where I need to have a more sort of emotional, overarching effect on the thing, I quite like just half hiding mischief and using it as acetate on the screen, basically.
Yeah.
It's cool.
That's fantastic. And I mean, considering that, like, Chris, you're a very musical person, that I'm sure music was very important to get right in this, and using any tool possible to kind of improve your...
Well, this is almost like taking someone's idea and applying it in a way that was never anticipated, but a wonderful way to track it and visualize a concept to yourself that then you can use as a functioning tool. It's I don't you call it an overlay, but it's so much more than that. It's like a hand-drawn garage band in advance of what it's going to look like when it's right, and then that becomes a very useful cataloging and subsorting mechanism for your own visualization. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
For those that can't just write the music, that's the simpler way of doing it. But
I mean, that's what you want GarageBand to do. Is just you draw a picture and then you get the music.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we've taken you guys from the very beginning of your production right up to like composing and scoring, and shown all the ins and outs, character design, everything. So we're going to show the teaser trailer again, and this time you'll be able to see the opening Soyuz rocket shot, as well as you'll get to see Chris's mustache being puppeteered as well. So I'm going to play that now.
9, 8, 7, 5,
Laughing at my own joke there, that was but
It's not rocket science.
That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. we've had a lot of questions, and we've actually even got a drawing that I want to share with you that came through on Twitter too.
Wow.
Did you do a drawing, Bex?
I didn't do a drawing, but a lovely 6-year-old person did do a drawing and has a question attached to it. But I think, so let's bounce around with this a little bit. So, what is the coolest thing about becoming a cartoon character, Chris?
Coolest thing about becoming a cartoon character? Well, actually, it's kind of dangerous because it's far worse than looking in the mirror. It's like looking in a funhouse mirror where someone else gets to move the mirror all the time, and so
and do your voice for you.
And do my voice for me. So your entire image of yourself is in somebody else's hands. But at the same time, it's delightful. It's just fun. You know, it's like. It's very liberating now to be portrayed that way and to watch what this character is going to be able to do. It's fun all around.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I love that your moustache has its own rigging. You know? I absolutely adore that. That's amazing.
It'll have to be in the credits.
Yeah.
Mustache played by.
Chris's
mustache.
So we have a question as well about what advice, Chris, would you give to a red-green colourblind child who wants to be an astronaut?
Well, I think the most important thing is don't put limitations on yourself right now based on some current set of restrictions. When I chose to be an astronaut, Canada had no astronauts.
Yeah.
We had no astronaut program. When I chose to be an astronaut, it didn't matter how tall you were, how short you were, how good, what particular strengths and weaknesses your body had. It was impossible.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, I could give up because right now it doesn't happen. But I also thought, you know what, the only thing I can really work on is my own particular set of skills. And maybe someday Canada will say, we want astronauts. And who wants to go? And I thought, if that ever comes along, I want to be able to stick my hand up as high as I can possibly do it. And there used to be all sorts of things that now we can modify. Just straight vision used to be a disqualifier, and now NASA accept astronauts who have had LASIK surgery and can improve their eyes. And our depth of understanding, people that have had surgical things done to them that in the past would always be a disqualifier. Now we have enough understanding of medicine and what those do long term that those no longer are a restriction. Or the first astronauts, I was way too tall to be one of the first astronauts because the ships were so small, but the size restrictions changed. So I think if you give up on your dreams right at the very beginning because of a current set of constraints, that has a cost. Giving up on your dreams has a cost. And I think if you say, you know, I would love to be an astronaut, and in my case, what I really wanted to do was walk on the moon. That's what I wanted to do, was walk on the moon. And I still haven't walked on the moon. You know, fundamentally, I'm a failure because I have not done.
Oh my God!
I have not done what it was I set out to do. But I think everything I've done in pursuit of walking on the moon has just been a joy. It's been a delight. It's been fascinating. I've loved and it wasn't just flying on the spaceship that I loved. It's the thousands and thousands of days and steps along the way that I really, really loved. And so I wouldn't put too much concern about the end game of your dreams. Instead, I would have the dream as a way to help you shepherd your life in a direction that you like, and take pleasure in all of the steps along the way. And if you don't get to walk on the moon, that's okay. You had 1,000 steps that took you in a direction that suited who you are and helped define who you're going to be.
You say in the book as well, it's not about the sort of overarching grand goal. It's the little decisions you make every day to make yourself into the person that you know.
Well, I love that you made that decision at 9 years old, and we were talking about that earlier, about to be so focused and so clear about that at 9. It's extraordinary. And
I was both very determined but also very realistic, and so I thought, well, I'll never really be an astronaut. I mean, I'm Canadian. We don't have astronauts. But I thought, astronauts, they learn things, and I became an engineer, and they become a pilot, and learn to scuba dive, and learn to speak other languages, and climb mountains, and try and keep a healthy body. And every single one of those steps was just fun and interesting. And I thought, and all of them looks, to a 9-year-old kid, that looks like a great sequence of things to go through. And if I don't eventually fly a spaceship, that's so what, you know? And at any given moment, that could all go away anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so don't hate what's happening in the short term in hopes that someday in the distance you'll enjoy something. Try and do it the other way around if you possibly can.
I really hope that answered that question.
I realised I can make a hockey reference, which I'm very pleased about.
Oh yeah.
That you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Gretzky.
Yeah. So, what was your main reason for going down the animated route instead of doing a show in person? Was it the tech, the audience appeal? Was it?
The reason we chose animated, it gives you so much more freedom to express a complex idea in a short time. You can be so much more nuanced in your expression of it. And there's already lots of me trying to explain things in person.
Yeah.
We've made 100 of those type of videos that are all out on YouTube, and books and music. But to me, the freedom that you get through putting together something like this, I think, is another way to take an idea and present it to people, and probably the one that has the highest bandwidth over a short period of a combination of ideas, words, images, and music. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, what is a YouTube video worth? You know, it's a lot. And so we just thought it's not the only thing we're doing, but it's hopefully a really effective and worthwhile thing to be doing.
And I think it talks to like everybody, right? Like children, adults. Like
I think we think in cartoons.
I
mean, essentially, if you consider the images that are in your head about previous things that have happened in your life, they're not a completely beautiful, nuanced, high-definition, three-dimensional representation. They're sort of a cartoon version of what actually happened. That's how we visualize things. At least that's what goes on inside my own head.
I'm going to take that because I'm going to take that for me because it's like, I can really relate to that. That's good. That's cool.
My whole life to me is a cartoon.
One big cartoon. One big cartoon in Chris Hadfield's head. That's amazing.
A Rocky montage.
So we do have a question from. So I'm going to show you this picture first. Let me get this open. Gosh, it's gone a bit crazy here. So this is a drawing from Otoni, age 6. Wow. So this is you, Chris, with a toothache. And the question is, let's see what the question says at the top.
Question says, has anyone ever had a toothache in space?
Yes.
It's a beautiful drawing, and I don't know if you want to show it to the camera. They got my mustache and my tie.
If
I go really close up to the camera here.
That's a hell of a drawing.
That's a beautiful and quick sketch of me.
Amazed with my pink back.
Probably done with fairly basic software.
Looks like paper. Yeah, I think.
We're worried about toothaches in space. If you have a pressure change, if you had a little bit of if someone put a filling on your tooth and they inadvertently trapped some air in between your tooth and the filling, then if suddenly the pressure drops, then that will become heavier pressure, and you can all of a sudden have nerve pain inside your teeth that you would never have if you stayed at sea level. So we have very aggressive astronaut dentists who before a space flight will go through and remove all your old fillings and put in new ones for you. Just sort of recreationally. Seems that way. Just to make sure that we launch for space with as good and healthy a set of teeth as possible. So hopefully you won't. But you do run the risk of breaking a tooth up there, of course, or something untoward happening. And our crew, one of the crew members actually did break a tooth while we were up there. So we got to do some sort of minor medical work, and we got to get out the little, we trained in dentistry up there. I can go in and freeze your mouth, and I can do basic surgery and pull a tooth. If I wouldn't recommend me, but I can do it if I need to. And but we went in and built a new replacement where the piece of the tooth had broken off in amongst our crew. So it wasn't so much a toothache, just a broken piece. But it's not that astronauts don't get toothaches. Of course, we take care of our teeth and brush our teeth, but we also go to the dentist specifically to make sure that not only are our bodies as healthy as possible, but even our teeth are as ready as possible for spaceflight.
You have to train as paramedics as well.
Yeah, anybody at any time. One of our big risks, if you think about here, pass me your water bottle. Of course, here the water stays in the bottom of this bottle. If I spill it, it goes on the floor. But if we were in weightlessness and you had this bottle open, the water would come out and start floating around the room, and it is just as likely to go into the electrical fixture in the room as it is anywhere else. And so you can have a short, an electrical short, any time, and the water's not going to go anywhere. And so you can get electrocuted on a spaceship anytime. It's one of the risks. So how do you deal with someone? And electrocution can cause, your heart to stop and all sorts of burns and problems. And so we need to train for any type of medical eventuality. We try and launch healthy people, but we still want to be trained. And so, we train in emergency medicine, and then hopefully as many basic medical skills as possible. And then I worked in emergency at a hospital, and as people would get hurt and cut and in accidents and shot and things and came into the hospital, it was actually me standing there pretending I was competent to give them an IV and diagnose what was going on and intubate them and catheterize them or whatever needed to be done.
Wow.
Hanging from a...
No, just standing there on the floor.
So, Chris,
simulating zero.
what in your opinion gets people the most engaged in learning about science?
What gets people the most
There's
engaged
been a
in
lot of
learning
comments about that.
science?
Oh, sorry.
I think a fundamental curiosity in why and how things work, a dissatisfaction with the answer that somebody's given you, an observable disconnect between what somebody told you and what you see, and maybe a dissatisfaction with the fact that something doesn't exist yet. The software that Dan's been using for this, it didn't need to exist. And it wasn't going to create itself. But someone, or the huge team of people 50 years ago that it would take to be able to make an animation like this, they were irritated with the process, and they tried to find ways to come up with some cool new way, and someone came up with some idea and somebody else came up with it, and suddenly you can invent something that allows you to do something that otherwise was impossible. And if you never show somebody that impossible things happen, then I think you've really denied them something important. But if you're a 9-year-old kid and you can see something happen in front of your eyes that up until very recently was impossible, and it only became possible because of human invention and human creativity, like, a heart transplant. When I was a kid, it was the very first heart transplant. And to think that we actually had invented a way to save someone's life by using a part of a person who had already died and put it in and allow that person to live. To me, that was what an incredible invention. And I thought, well, what else can we do? Or how do we do that? Or how it set off a whole cascade of new thoughts in my head. And so I think presenting as often as possible the wonder of creativity and invention, the recognition that we can make impossible things happen, and then inspire people to then learn all the basic things necessary to allow them to be part of that group of people that makes impossible things happen. That's kind of at the whole core of the motivation, but also the discovery that comes from it.
Awesome. So we do have another question from Thomas Brockhurst, aged 5. When you sleep in space, do you dream you're floating?
When you sleep in space, do you dream you're floating?
Yeah.
I don't remember dreaming that I was floating. Maybe the opposite is true, Thomas. When you come back to Earth, the first night you get home, of course, you get into a bed. You haven't floated in a bed or slept in a bed for a long time, and it's kind of weird. But when I was just starting to wake up in the morning, when it was just the first inkling of being awake, I had this sensation that I was floating above my bed.
Wow.
I think because when you're standing up, it's pretty clear that gravity's squishing you down. But when you're floating in a nice, comfortable bed or suspended by a mattress, you can sort of fool yourself into thinking you're floating. And my body forgot that it was on Earth. And I actually had the very clear sensation the next morning that I was floating above my bed. And then as I got more and more awake, I realized, oh, no, I'm back here on Earth. But then the next morning I woke up, but it didn't last as long. And after about 3 or 4 mornings, my body had completely remembered that it was back on Earth, and I didn't feel like I was floating anymore. So I think it was maybe the opposite. When you come back to Earth, sometimes you dream about floating.
Yeah. So, having spent part of your life in space, how do you judge the depiction of space action in blockbusters? Is it realistic or no?
So the movies that portray space, most of them are just the same as X-Men or Spider-Man or whatever. They're not intended to be accurate. They're not documentaries. They're not training movies for astronauts. They're just fantasy.
Yeah.
Interstellar even, or they allow us to dream. They're sort of a visual animation of the things that we haven't figured out how to do yet. I think what's good about them is they really show what we're actually interested in.
Yeah.
Cool stuff, big things. What would it look like to get that close to a discontinuity in space and time, and what would it be like if you were left alone on Mars, or if a piece of debris wrecked your spaceship and you were caught outside. And it's not quite so important that it's an absolutely perfect, cut and dried representation of reality as we know it. To me, sometimes it's good just to let your mind go free. But if what's happening on the screen is something that is currently real, if it's a space shuttle or a space station or a Russian spaceship or a Chinese spaceship, then for me to see it portrayed incorrectly or dismissively, or if you just choose to break the laws of physics, then it ruins it for me. And I'm the wrong guy, of course, to be watching the movie because that's my specialty. But what I compare it to is if you were watching a person driving a car in a movie and they turned the wheel this way and the car went that way, everybody in the theater would go, "What? That's not how it works." Didn't those guys? Didn't they even do their homework? That's not how cars work. And so quite a few of the space movies look like that because the car goes the wrong way all the time in the space movies. But I'm not, it's probably like a surgeon watching a medical movie or a policeman watching a police movie. Everybody sees the inaccuracies of just trying to tell a story. Some movies are worse than others. Some are just a complete fantasy. And the only last part of that is, if so long as it is just the suspension of disbelief in a fantasy, that's okay. But if the movie actually starts to take the place of education for people, if people form their conclusions about the reality of something that actually exists, and the movie has deliberately made it inaccurate or mocked it or belittled it or trivialized it somehow, then I think actually you're doing everybody a big disservice. And so that kind of irks me as well, especially as someone who has done my best to try and explain the reality of things. But it's not really their job in making a movie. Their movie's just there to sell tickets and entertain people.
Exactly.
We don't want governments to make policy by watching Jurassic Park and going, no DNA research.
No, we all know. Let's not do that one. So we do have a lovely little gentleman here that would like to come and ask a question. So Harrison, and he's also done a little drawing for you as well.
Harrison.
So Harrison, do you want to squeeze in?
Yeah,
Maybe we'll swap.
Grab a spot there.
We'll swap. So
hello, Harrison.
What question would you like to ask Commander Chris Hadfield?
What is it like in space, and what does it feel like working on this project?
What is it like in space, and what does it feel like working on this project? being in space is, I was kind of worried, Harrison, because I decided to be an astronaut when I was about your age, and I worked at it my whole life, but I was a little bit concerned, what if I get there and I don't like it? You know, like, what if I've worked on this for so many years and I get there and I find out, I don't even like this. This wasn't nearly what I thought it was going to be. So I was a little bit worried about that. And so when you ask me what's it like in space, number one is it's magic because you can fly. You can push off with your finger and fly across the room. You can do 1,000 somersaults. It's like you are Superboy. Just suddenly you can push with your toes and soar forever, or you can spin 1,000 times. So being magic is good. And then you're doing something really, really hard, but you're doing it well because everybody trained you. So you sort of feel like you're writing an exam and you know the answer to every question. So there's a really nice feeling when you're good at something and when you've worked at it a long time. So it's magic and you're feeling confident because they've made you good at something. And then the last part is every time you float to the window, a new part of the world is going by. There's all of Africa. You can see right from one end of the River Nile to the other just by looking out the window. Or you can see where continents are ripping apart from each other, where Africa and Asia are ripping apart because of continental drift. You can see all the outback of Australia, or you can see a meteorite burn up in the atmosphere underneath you. You can see the whole world. And that combination, it turned out not only to be fun, but better than I dreamed it would be. And I had pretty big dreams about how good it was going to be. So it looks like you put a lot of thought into spaceflight. And what I see here is a space station with the Canadarm on it. That's very nice. And
next to a black hole.
And there's also
and a
you.
black hole.
Yeah.
Nice. And it looks like, boy, a whole sequence of things. There's a globe of the Earth. And is that the moon over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see the moon and a rocket ship and
Saturn.
and Saturn, right? There's Saturn right over there with a big spot in the middle, and and it looks like there are these meteors,
Asteroids and shooting stars.
asteroids and shooting stars coming down to Earth, and I think it's delightful that you know about all these things, and
The
that
asteroid field right here.
and an asteroid field, right? I am not going to drive through that asteroid field. That looks like a bad place for my spaceship.
Yeah.
But thank you for drawing this for me and for all of the thought that went into it.
Thank you, Harrison. A little round of applause for Harrison.
Thanks,
Okay. So we are slowly hitting the witching hour. So I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to plough through the other bits that have come in. But there is one question that I did want to ask. Where will the series be aired? When will the first episode be available?
The teaser trailer hopefully will go up later tonight, and that'll be on Chris's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And then the
So if you
pilot-
just go to YouTube
Yeah.
and put in Chris Hadfield, it'll head to our YouTube channel where virtually all of the videos that we've made, the one from space, the music videos, the explanatory videos, a lot of them, they're all there already. So Chris Hadfield under YouTube. Yep.
And the finished episodes, once they are online, which we're looking at sort of mid-February, they will be in a playlist on your channel, so you can.
Yeah,
view them
so all the
on
episodes
YouTube.
will be free on YouTube. So just subscribe to Chris's YouTube channel. And then we have a Patreon on patreon.com if you just go and type in It's Not Rocket Science. And you can subscribe to that and get a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff,
Wonderful.
storyboards, all sorts of videos and stuff.
Wonderful. So, just a quick one, because I saw it and I was like, I've got to ask this question. What do you think the 9th planet should be called, Chris?
The way that we chose to name Pluto, I thought was delightful. Had a competition of young people all over, and for with different ideas and why you might want to name a planet. And the planets have been named, after mythical figures, and so it's not up to me to decide. I really think that's a lovely thing to crowdsource, a
Yeah.
lovely thing to take ideas from all around the world. What's important to us now? What symbology do we see in the sky? And the beauty of it is there's as Harrison drew, there's almost an unlimited number of planets out there, and so in truth, every single one of us should get to name one.
Oh, wow, yeah, wow. Oh my gosh, I want to say thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time out and coming over to share this with us tonight. We were all a little bit disbelieving, and it's just like, wow. So thank you so much.
In the people in this room have created an invention that allows what could be a completely selfish thought, or someone with the inability to truly let somebody else in on what they're visualizing or thinking. They've created a tool that allows it to so easily or in an unprecedented way with ease to get out where other people can look at it and see it and think about it and interpret it. A sharing of creativity, and I have huge respect for that. And for these two who are taking our poorly articulated ideas and turning them into something that not only will be delightful the first time you see it, but will be something you want to go back and watch and will last and will be instructional of its own. So thank you for the invitation to be part of it today, and thank you for all the work that led into our very first little snippet of what this is going to look like.
And I also thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. And also a special thank you to Evan as well. Thank you so much as well for this. We really, wow, thank you. So everyone in this room, I want a big round of applause for our guests tonight. And like Chris said, be sure to go over and check his YouTube channel, Colonel Chris Hadfield, to see the trailer. So we will see you again sometime soon online. I want to say thank you very much for joining wherever you are around the world. Have a good evening, good day, good afternoon, wherever you are. So good night. Bye.
The world is round. Bye-bye.